Hello and welcome to the M is for Mama podcast. I'm your host, Abby Halberstadt, happy wife, mama to 10, Bible-believing Christian. And on today's episode, I have a guest that you guys have been asking me for the longest time. RuthAnn Zimmerman is here today to talk about chores and childhood responsibilities. And I just love her no-nonsense, get right down to it, practical approach. And I know you guys will too. Before we dive into that conversation with her, I want to highlight our podcast sponsor, as always, Voetberg Music Academy, where you can have siblings learning together for as little as $30 a month in instruments like piano, ukulele, guitar, fiddle, and mandolin. You can use the code MSForMama20 for 20% off each month that you're enrolled. And you can even have your kids earn cash and ribbons for their accomplishments sent to their front door. Who does not love receiving gifts like that in the mail? And I know each kid that earns those prizes will be so excited to continue learning. And that's the best thing about Voetberg, is that your kids will want to continue practicing and learning more about their lessons. Don't forget to use the code MSForMama20 for 20% off each month that you're enrolled at VoetbergMusicAcademy.com. Okay, friends, this is going to be such a treat and a blessing to everyone who listens, I know, but also I'm just personally excited because my friend RuthAnn Zimmerman is on the podcast today, and we have worked so hard to get to this interview. Hey, RuthAnn, how are you?
I am good. I am glad that you and I are both on the other side of the dental work that kept us postponing our podcasts. And I think one thing that tells listeners about us is we are in the same stage of motherhood, the stage where your teeth start showing your
Oh my
age.
goodness. Yep. Yep. Your teeth start showing your age and how many children you've had. Like it's
Yes.
man, those pregnancies are really, really hard on your teeth. I wish I knew back when I was, first becoming pregnant, like ways to help my teeth along. But yeah, yeah.
Well, I've thought about that, but I now that we have adult children and we have a daughter that's raising her own children, and the last thing I want to tell her is don't make sure you're taking care of your teeth, you know, because everything is already so heavy when
Yeah,
you're in that survival stage, and everything that's not hurting does not get attention. If it's not hurting or screaming, you're not going to think about it. So I've thought about what would I tell my daughters about their teeth and their health when they're pregnant, and I'll just be quiet because
yeah,
they don't need one more thing to worry about or fret about or take care of.
yeah. That's really, really wise. I think if I learn something that's like so easy, like, hey, listen, when you're brushing your teeth at night, add some iodine in, or, this kind of thing,
Yes.
like something that just could be a fail safe to be helpful. But you're right. Adding one more thing to the to-do list of a really busy, stressed out new mom is probably not the best idea for us older moms. Us older moms, RuthAnn. Oh my goodness, that's who we are. It's so weird. Does that feel weird to you still, or have you just like settled in like that's who I am? I'm a
I
Titus
think
mom.
I think I've settled into what my identity as a grandma is,
Yeah.
and I'm embracing it 100%. Um, because I know that with an age span of like 16, I think my age span is 16
Mhm.
years. I know that my legacy starts now as a grandma because my younger grandchildren may never remember me, right?
Hmm.
By the
Yeah.
time Harrison is having babies, I may not be here anymore. Or their memories may not stretch long enough because my younger children have never met my father.
Mhm.
So I know that the legacy that I'm going to leave as a grandma will have to come from my older grandchildren.
That's a really good mindset. And I think even now, I find it interesting. Just the other day, my kids were talking about a particular event or thing that happened, and they were sharing what they remembered about it. And it was completely different than A, what I remembered about it, and B, what I would have preferred that they remember about it. And I don't say that as a discouragement to moms that are like, oh, nothing I'm doing is having an impact. No, it is. It's just we have to be faithful to do what the Lord calls us to do and allow Him to bring the harvest and work the impact in the ways that need to happen, as opposed to kind of the Hallmark versions that we really wish. We wish that they would like look back and be like, oh, you were always so caring, and I love the details that you put in my lunchbox in this agent. And they're like, that's the day that I stubbed my toe. And that's like that's what they
That's
got.
like that's the grandma memories. Those are the memories that grandmas get because they're not in survival mode.
Mm,
And moms, like as moms, and I've been thinking about this a lot because, I have a daughter that's a mom now, and I don't ever want to tell her, just relax and enjoy it, right?
yeah.
Because the truth is, that mama bear drive that we get, and how when you are raising little ones, everything seems a big deal,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
everything, like every little attitude that our 2-year-old grandson has, I would be like, oh, it's fine. It really doesn't mean anything. But you know what? I don't want to dilute that because God has given them that intense focus on that little character for a reason. So
Yeah.
I think young moms need to, instead of us telling them, oh, it's fine, it doesn't really mean that much, they'll be over it, we need to encourage them to embrace that intensity because it's that hyper focus on all those little character traits. And that's a good mom when
Yeah.
they are hyper focused on all of that. And I think that's a God-given instinct for that season of little ones.
I love that perspective. I think that's really, really wise not to we can help them by giving them perspective, saying like in the grand scheme of the things, you'll get lots more opportunities to train his character, but yeah, stay with it. Like, maybe
Yes,
don't panic, but I'm not telling you to back off a bit. You're doing good work. Keep
exactly.
going. So, segueing from that, I really wanted to talk today about a topic that is really hot button sometimes, depending on the audience. I don't think it will be with my audience nearly as much, especially coming from us, because I think we have how many kids between us?
I have 7.
Okay, so 17 kids between us. You said your age span is 16. My age span is 14. I think you're maybe a couple years older than I am. So very, very similar circumstances, age ranges. I mean, I could be having grandbabies within the next 5 years, probably something like that. So very, very similar stages of life, which I love. And I love that you talked about owning it. But let's rewind way, way back to when we only had little children. And let's talk about the topic of engendering responsibility in our small children starting from a young age. Um, Whether we want to call that engendering responsibility, chores, um, teaching them a work ethic, teaching them self discipline, these are all biblical precepts. This, as a Christian mom, should be something that should not be an issue of confusion. And yet, we have the secular world saying that if we teach our children how to work from an early age, that we're robbing them of their childhood. If we teach our children to be invested in their families by helping to care for their siblings, that we are parentifying them. I'm sure you've heard this term and had it thrown at you just like I have at me. Um, and I know that you have talked about in your book, The Heart of the Homestead, the idea that you wanted your children to learn to work from an early age, so much so that you took on responsibilities for yourself so that you could then pass them along, which that's hardcore. So, given that I've set all of that up, I just want you to take it and run. What was your philosophy with young children about chores, responsibilities, and giving them a work ethic?
Okay, so Elvin and I, we became parents very young. And we also, within the first 10 years of our marriage, left the Old Order Mennonite community, like the horse and buggy Mennonite community, and stepped into the modern world. And one of the biggest things that we noticed, I mean, there was, complete lifestyle change. We sold our horse and buggy, bought a minivan, and that's just a fraction of it. But one of the things that we noticed and that shocked us, coming from a more old fashioned culture, more of a family oriented culture, is how child run the rest of the world was.
Yeah.
Where the whole family caters to the children, and childhood is seen as an idol, and parents put all of their efforts into this idol of childhood. And it was shocking to us, so much so that we took a step back and we were like, wait, we no longer want to be, I mean, we're excommunicated from our Old Order Mennonite community. We
Yeah.
don't desire to be, part of that religious oppression, but we absolutely do not want to raise our family to the standards of the secular world.
Right.
So we took a step back and we started asking, okay, so how did we learn self-discipline? Because that's one of the big things we saw is children just run amok and there was no self-discipline. They did whatever they wanted to. And anyway, so we started questioning, how did we learn self-discipline? How did we learn work ethic? In within the Mennonite community. And Elvin grew up he was one of 13. He is one of 13 children, and they had a dairy farm, right? I'm middle of nine, and I grew up on a hog farm. So farrow to finish, which means, mama pigs, their babies, all the way to fat pigs. We had a family milk cow. We both had big gardens, and we both agreed that where we first remember feeling the sense of responsibility was when we had to get up and do chores before we rode our bicycles to the Mennonite school.
Hmm.
So that is kind of where we put our stake in. And we said, okay, if we want our 4 and 5 year old daughters to turn out to be great adults, they need chores. And so we bought a box full of baby chicks, and we didn't know if they were meat birds or laying birds or what they were. We were just after chicks so that our daughters have to take care of something before they take care of themselves.
Right.
And so that was our first. And a lot of people, we're known in the homesteading community as homesteaders. But if you peel back all those layers of our family milk cow, of the garden, all the canning, the preserving, peel back all those layers, at the very root of what you see us doing is work ethic and responsibility for our children. That is what we set out to create, is something for our children to do. And that's the reason, Abby, that's the whole reason we have two milk cows. We don't need two milk cows. We don't need 8 gallons of milk a day.
Hmm.
But I have 3 little boys, and they need a reason to get out of bed at 6 a.m. and get things done before they head off to school. And that
Okay,
is
so
why
I'm
we
going to
have two
interrupt
milk
you.
cows.
I'm going to
Okay,
interrupt you and say that there's going to be some moms out there, including in my audience, that are like, wait, 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 wait. Why do little children need a reason to get out of bed at 6 a.m., RuthAnn? Like, give me some sort of kind of
okay,
background for that. Like prove it.
okay. So childhood is not our idol. We are, and believe me, my children get a lot of time to play. Um, and they are turning into men, right? We
Mm-hmm.
cannot wait until they're 18 to set an
Right.
alarm and say, this is when you get up and this is how you be responsible.
Yeah.
We can't wait until they have a family to start developing those skills. They and my boy, we are early risers, right? 6 a.m. for us could be somebody else's 8 a.m. It
Sure.
doesn't matter what the time is.
Right.
But I'm an early riser. Most of the family are early risers. And could I do all the chores after they go off to school? I absolutely could. It would be more peaceful. I would enjoy it more, but that is not why we have milk cows and chickens and pigs. We
And let
have
me,
them.
yeah, no,
Okay,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. We have those animals to develop work ethic and character and responsibility in our children.
I love what you just touched on, where you said it would be more peaceful and easier. Now, there are a whole lot of moms that would disagree with the easier part because that's a lot of chores to do. You guys have
Well,
in, go ahead.
okay, so here's the thing. We usually, and this touches on when to start giving children chores. If you wait until they can actually carry weight and make a difference in chores, you have missed the best time to set the base for chores. You
Mm,
must start chores while they are still too young to really help, because what you're doing with those 3 and 4 year olds, when you are including them and giving them chores, you are setting the foundation of, I am needed in this family, I am important. And by the time they are able to actually milk a cow, per se, or make a bed or whatever, you don't have to still instill that you are worthy and you are needed, because you did all of that when they were 3 and 4 and they were doing nothing except slowing you down.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that because what you're saying is put in the work early when it's inconvenient for you to give your children that sense of, you use the word worthy, but I think we both agree that our worth comes from Christ. But really, what you're saying is that you have something to contribute, like you, because little children may not necessarily completely internalize, like, listen, just sit there and be quiet or play because you really don't have anything to contribute. But when we do the opposite proactively and we say, hey, you can work too, you're part of this family, get in here and help, they do, their faces shine. I mean, there's going to be a lot of moms that are like, my kid's face doesn't shine. He fights me every step of the way. There are personalities. But for the most part, kids love to be included and to be given that sense of pride and
Yes.
joy and purpose that comes from work. And we see that way back in the garden that God
And
gives.
it does, if we think about our 2 and 3 year olds, even our 4 year olds, and you said, our worth comes from our identity in Christ. But I think if we're honest, the way a child grows to see their identity in Christ and their worthiness starts with the parent-child relationship.
Mhm,
So if a
yeah,
child understands that I am needed and I am worthy in this family, it's so much easier for them to grasp, just a couple short years later, let's say between 8 and 12, that I am worthy in the family of God. Like their first roots of worthiness come from within the home and within the relationships and
yeah.
within the chores that are happening.
Yeah, I love that. Um, and so as you're encouraging moms to look for ways to involve their kids at a very young age and even inconvenience themselves to find things, I know that there's going to be moms that come in and say to find things that include their kids when they're racking their brains, because maybe you found this to be true too. But I get messages constantly asking for lists of things that ages of children can do. Do you get this all the time?
Yes, I actually, in my childhood chores ebook that I have on my website, I actually have lists written down for people because I get that too. And people, and I don't blame parents. I'm not going to judge anybody saying people just don't know. But for too many generations, we've not been intentional.
Yeah.
So people just haven't seen it modeled. Like, what can toddlers do? What can 2 year olds do? What can 3 year olds do? And so I have a list on my website. I know that you probably have lists somewhere
I
too.
do. Yep.
But basically, I tell parents with toddlers in preschool age, you look at your day and you're like, what do we need to do today? And then you divide those chores up by what can they help with and what must I do while they are napping.
Mm,
And then everything that can get done with toddlers gets done with toddlers. And then when they are napping, that is when you do the things that you're going to either hustle through and you don't want their distraction, or if you need to do things like in the garden and it's too muddy or whatever, to take the toddlers. So I always divided my things up, and now as a grandma I'm constantly looking for ways to, oh, Winston could help me with this, I'll make this a project to do when he comes over. And it's just a little more diluted as a grandma because I'm not with him, day in and day out.
right.
But when my children were little, I would wake up and I'd be like, okay, they can help me make cookies and they can help me do laundry. But then when they go down for a nap, I'm going to can this chicken.
Yeah. Yeah. What would you say to the mom who is listening to this and is like, oh, shoot, I've dropped the ball? She said I was supposed to do this by 2 and 3. I've got an 8-year old that has no experience with chores. He's fighting me on everything. Where do I start now?
Okay, so in my ebook, and I don't mean to keep bringing this up, but
No,
I
but
do
having a
lay it
resource they
out.
can go to,
Okay,
that's great.
I do lay out what if I haven't started. And the thing is, you're working towards mastery. And I lay it out like, if you're gonna give your 3 year old a chore of helping with the laundry, you start your 8 year old in on the list for 2 and 3 year olds. And they're just gonna build a whole lot faster on that mastery.
Yeah.
You don't throw an 8 year old in and say, okay, you're gonna make dinner, right?
Right.
You start them where you would with the 2 and 3 year olds, like, hey, I need you to, start helping me peel potatoes and things like that. And then you build on mastery. The thing to remember is 8 year olds are going to push back. That it doesn't matter if you started at 2 or if you started at 10. They get to a certain developmental age and they're wanting to be independent thinkers, and they're just going to push back. It's just the nature of things. But there's a difference between talking back and being disrespectful and pushing back with ideas. We expect our children of that age to push back with ideas. And so one of the ways that we work with this is attitude. A bad attitude is never okay about chores.
Yeah.
And so okay, I'll just lay it out what we do with bad attitudes, because believe me, we have a lot of them and we work on them constantly. I even have bad attitudes sometimes,
Oh, same.
towards my children or towards chores.
Yeah.
So let's say washing dishes, and a 10-year-old knows it's their chore, but they're whining and complaining. And so our antidote for that is, it sounds like you need more practice. I guess you'll wash breakfast dishes too.
Yep.
Because so the children that I'm working with mostly right now are boys, and they're all about sports. So a coach, if somebody can't make their baskets and basketball, what is the coach going to do? He's going to set you down and make you shoot over and over and over until you get it right. And that's the same philosophy we use in our home for bad attitudes or chores that are done poorly. It's just a calm, I guess you need more practice. And then we assign extra to, see if they can get their attitude right. Now, my boys, right now, so they are almost 10, almost 11, and they're 13. So usually a little bit of a warning puts them right where they need to be, because we've done it for so many years now. I'll say, well, it sounds like somebody needs practice. And the person that needs practice will shape right up because they don't want extra chores.
Right. That's smart. And I love that you point out that it is never too late to start and that you can start them on that younger track. And you'll have missed out maybe on a lot of years of training that bedrock kind of foundation, but it doesn't mean that you should throw your hands up in despair and just kind of oh well, we missed that boat. I talk in
Yeah.
You Bet Your Stretch Marks about a mom who came and was like, what do you do about twin boys that are jumping all over everything and disrespecting my house and making it impossible to finish dinner? And I told her, bring them into the kitchen with you and give them jobs to do. And her response was like, I had told her to set a bomb off in her house or something. Because, as you said at the very beginning, we do have a culture that very much so values ease and comfort. We value it for our children in some ways by idolizing childhood, like you said, but we value it for ourselves. And I really feel like a lot of moms don't know where to start because they are not thinking long term. So, talk to me kind of about some of the long-term benefits you've seen with your older kids of starting them at this young age and creating responsibilities for them.
So this is a very, very good point to touch on. So first of all, to the moms who may have been raised in a convenience, lifestyle where we make things as easy as possible for our children. One of the character traits that we're missing when we were raised in a culture that catered to us is we don't connect hard with growing,
Hmm.
right? So, as a mom, if you're in that stage, I challenge you to embrace every time something feels hard to say, "Oh God, I must be growing
Hmm.
because something feels hard," right?
Hard is not the
Because
same
that
thing as
is,
bad. It's a sign of growth. Yeah.
yes, it's you're growing, right? If something feels hard, it's just because you're stretching. It's just like your muscles. And so we teach this to our children from a young age. Yes, milking a cow is hard, right? But if you stop every time your arm gets tired, you're never going to build that muscle that you need, right? And so a cow has a hormonal letdown just like mamas do. And the more milk you get out during that hormonal window of letdown, the faster you milk, the more milk you're going to get.
Okay.
from that. Okay, so it's important that our boys understand from a young age that you got to push through the pain. You got to
Yeah.
just keep milking, right? And so spiritually, that's us as adults. You have to be comfortable with the pain of growth. And so under when we understand that from a young age that pain, hard is not bad. Hard is actually I'm growing. And how that transfers to adult children is, I'm going to sound very self-righteous when I say this. But my children are adults now, so I can say how proud I am of them, right? I can
Sure.
say
Absolutely.
on the internet for the world to hear that I am so proud that our adult children, that I see them not shrinking back from God's will just because it looks hard or because the world tells them that's going to be way too hard. You shouldn't do that. And I don't ever want my children to be anywhere except in the center of God's will. And they need to know what hard feels like if they want to stay in the center of God's will. Anyway, did that answer your question?
Absolutely, it answered my question. I think that what moms are hearing you say is that not growing weary of doing good, which a lot of times is hard. I mean, the not growing weary part is always hard. We are weary. I'm working on a devotional and I was talking about the idea of the difference between feeling weary and growing weary because the Bible never tells us not to feel weary. Even Jesus felt weary and he needed rest. And a lot of times he still didn't get it because he would go across the lake to get away from people and then they would chase him around the lake and he didn't kick them out. He said, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. And he didn't get his rest. That if that doesn't describe motherhood so much of the time, we have that example in Christ. So growing weary is throwing up your hands and saying it's not worth it. Feeling weary, there's no precedent for that our emotions have to be like um yippee ki and jumping up and down at the heart all the time. It's the pressing through. I really, really love the metaphor that you gave of you get more milk, you get more output, you get more giftings and more opportunities when you push through that initial hard. And so hearing that has laid a great foundation for your kids, I think will be really encouraging. It's not, you're boasting in the Lord, Ruth Ann. You're not saying
Okay.
like, look what I have wrought. You're saying, look what God's principles have wrought as I have been
Yes.
faithful to invest. I think another point that I would love to you to touch on is, and I know that you mentioned your ebook, and we'll put that in our show notes as a resource. But I think there's going to be a lot of moms. Let me back up and say this. My mother is wonderful, and she is such an example to me, and has been my greatest mentor and cheerleader, and just spiritual guide as a mother myself. However, she quote unquote only had two children. We were 4 years apart. We were homeschooled, but we were both kind of academics. So we would get our school done very quickly and we would go like play with our friends all day. Now it looked like making cookies and picking blackberries and soaping the trampoline. But there wasn't a ton of work in my early childhood. And I do think that the one thing that I would, if fault is the right word, fault my mother for is that she did too much for us, actually. Now, I want to say that as an adult, I am a hardworking person. I have a strong work ethic and I am, quote, productive and I get my stuff done and I meet my deadlines. So it didn't ruin me for life, but I have definitely found, especially as a very young mom, first getting married and having kids, that I had to learn a lot of things that I wish I already had in my tool belt. I had to learn time management in areas of household management, whereas I'd had it in areas of schooling. I had the time management, but I'd only had to apply it in certain pockets of my life, if that makes sense. And
Hmm.
it wasn't that I never did chores. I'm making it sound like I was completely lazy. I just think I could have handled more. I actually wish I'd been pushed more because I think it would have set me up a little better starting out as an adult, getting married at 22. So that is with a mom who did laundry and vacuuming and made food for me and things like that. I think some moms are hearing you talk about your reality, and you've probably heard this to be true in your DMs, and they're like, wait, how does that relate to mine? Because I don't homestead, I don't do hard labor. Is there still worth in just teaching my kids to pick up their socks and clean out the car and things like that. Like, do you feel like it has to be hard work, or do you feel like the average kind of American family that doesn't homestead can still benefit from all of these principles?
Okay, so in short, yes. And here's what I want mothers to know. You're going to work yourself out of a job. You're going to
Mm,
teach them how to make meals, how to do laundry, how to clean every part of the house. And because in my experience, a child needs, and each child is different, right? But a child needs just enough chores so that their free time feels like a reward.
mm, that's a good
And
perspective.
each child is a little different. And then there's children that need hard physical labor to feel like they are fulfilled, or, to get all of their testosterone burned up. Um, but there's other children that could bake cookies and be content. So mothers, you need to work yourself out of a job. And this is not child labor. This is two things: keeping your children learning skills, keeping them engaged in the home, and helping them be productive, and teaching them self-discipline.
Yeah.
And don't worry, you're going to get all the work back, because here's what happens. So you start when they're 2 or 3, and you're just teaching them laundry, everything. And you get to be where I am, and I can write whole books
Yeah.
because my house runs without me. But here's what happens. Don't get too envious, because about 16, 17, just when they are proficient at running the entire house, they get a job. They might get a boyfriend, and that suddenly their social life, and you're going to set them free.
Hmm.
So you're going to get all the work back. The hardest one for me right now to let go is Hadassah, because she's 16, and all of her siblings, the minute they turned 16, they got a job. And I have not pushed her at all, because she is my right-hand girl
Hmm.
around here. And I have a couple more books I want to write. Believe me, if she says, "Mom, will you take me to apply for this job?" I will absolutely say yes. She hasn't asked. I'm not pushing. Um, but what needs to happen is she is going to start leaving the nest more and more. And guess what? The next child in line is going to step up, and he will take more responsibility. It's just, I like my girls in the house so much better than the boys.
Well, and I think that anybody that has boys, maybe the girl moms gasped, but people that have boys know why that is. It's
Well,
not because
listen, I've got a photo shoot coming up for my cookbook, and I'm just like, if my kitchen cabinets, which were put into our farmhouse probably in the early 70s, if they can withstand one more month of my boys doing dishes,
you know,
I'm going to be so surprised. I mean, this kitchen has taken a beating
yeah.
since the boys are old enough to work in the kitchen. It's just a different when you have boys in the kitchen versus
Hundred,
girls.
100%. In fact, we hosted a tea party in our house the other day for a group that I call Grace Girls, of homeschool girls that come over once a month to, it's not just my house, it's other people's houses too, but we host a tea party once a year. It's an annual thing. And I was gathering all of our like coffee mugs and teacups, and I have a pretty good collection from thrift stores and sales at Anthropology, just cute little designs, and I couldn't find more than 14. And I know that sounds like a lot. I don't have 14 in my cupboard at one time, but like I had a little collection of thrift store teacups. I went in the drawer and found those. There were like 4 left. And then I found this and I found that, and I needed like 25, and I've always had that, you know. And I'm like, these boys that do dishes have absolutely trashed my mug and teacup collection because
I
they're
have
so hard on them.
And they're not detail oriented when it comes to the kitchen, and we have to laugh so we don't cry. But this is a
No.
real life thing that has happened multiple times. I'm here in my kitchen and I'm making something, and I can't find a part to my mixer or something, and I'll call the school and I'll say, I'll remember which child's chore it is this week for putting clean dishes away.
Yeah.
And I'll call the school and I'll say, this child, can Kendrick please come to the phone? Hey, Kendrick, the part that goes on the mixer that I need for making cookie dough, where would you have put it?
Mhm. Hmm.
And I've always been able to solve those problems. I think it's happened 2 times this year where I've had to call, because he's just throwing things in cupboards and closing doors.
Yep.
And so, one of the questions that I get from moms sometimes when I talk about things like this is wait. So you're not being strict in saying, wait, this has to go here and this has to go here. The truth is, I do tell them. And there is some children that will remember and put it there. And there is other children, it doesn't matter. And at that point, like to them, it doesn't matter. Mom will call me back and tell me if it's not in
Yep.
the right place. And at that point, I choose relationship, right? I'm not going to
Absolutely.
discipline you because you didn't put something away where I said it needs to be. That's just way too much pressure for me, for my family. And there may be parents with only 2 children that can expect perfection, but in my family, I get to a point where I'm like, you know what, I'm going to choose relationship over the mixer parts always being put in the exact right place.
Well, and I think what you're modeling there for moms, because maybe that's more your personality. I think it's mine too. There are people that would die on that hill. I have a friend that would absolutely die on that hill. And there may probably be some more relational sparks there, but it's discovering your capacity and discovering your kids' capacity and paying attention to the individual personality because like you say, it is not fair. It is absolutely fair to have standards. It is absolutely fair to teach technique and to show your expectations and to say, this is where we should be aiming for. Do everything with excellence to the glory of God. 1 Corinthians 10:31, that's our goal, right? That would include putting away the mixer part in the right drawer, ideally. However, it's not fair to assume that the way that God has made our brains to work will automatically transfer just because this is my child that grew up in my home. And then to get upset when that is a weakness of theirs. Yeah, we keep working on it, but to be like snapping your fingers and saying like, I get this right, so you should be able to is yeah, it ruins relationship and it's
It
not
does. And I love that. And I remind myself of this that I cannot expect my 16-year-old daughter's brain to work like mine does. And also, like, one of the things I try to focus on a lot is okay, so something that's very important to me is that the kitchen is clean. Like, I can't have anything in the drain trap or, food left or a few dirty dishes. It's very important to me. So I often call my children back and say, hey, you got to take care of this, right? And I understand it's gross, right? But that is my important, right? As long as they are having a good attitude when I call them back, and they'll often say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I was thinking something else and I just left." As long as are having a good attitude when I call them back to redo things, I'm okay with that. Um, and then I try to think of things that are important to them, like their schoolwork and how much effort they're putting into their schoolwork and how, concerned they are. So they do have the ability to pay attention to detail. And we're all like this when it's something that's important to
yes.
us. And so I try to give grace there where number one, if I call them back and ask them to redo it, that they have a good and repentant attitude. And number two, are they able to put their whole self into something that's important to them? And if those two things happen, then it's a no, it's no contest. It's just, we just move on.
So good. And we just had this discussion with one of our older children today who typically does a good job of doing his job, of doing his responsibility. And you were talking about which child was doing the dishes that week. We actually have an extremely simple system where the same two children have been alternating wiping down surfaces and doing dishes in the kitchen as their jobs for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. Like that is their thing. And
I
then
actually really love that system.
it's you know what, and it's a little bit of a, I mean, selfish is not the right word, but it's just a convenient thing for me, but it's convenient for them too. They don't have to look at a chart or wonder what week it's on in the
Absolutely.
rotation. And so I try to do that, and that one's just really straightforward because it's kitchen. They know their area, they know their jobs. And then my other kids, the same thing. Once they settle into a thing, yes, they're capable of loading a dishwasher. Yes, they're capable and they do wipe things down. And yes, they're capable of vacuuming, but like they have zones that they're responsible for. And it just clears up a lot of space in my brain. Well, this one child that we were talking to, and in theirs too, I think, this one child that we were talking to was shirking on something because he wasn't choosing the right time to come home and be awake enough to do it. And then it was like, I'll do it the next morning. And we used, do you relate?
Oh, yes, I know exactly what age group you're talking about and
Yeah.
also which gender.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we were talking to him exactly about what you were saying. We were saying there is not a lot of merit in being diligent to do something which you already enjoy and value. We're talking about the fact that the Bible talks about not only do everything to the glory of God, but also this idea that like what credit is it to you if you love your friends and treat them well? Non-believers love their friends and treat
Mhm.
them well. They treat people well who treat them well back. It's when you love your enemies. Well, that same
Yeah.
concept extrapolates into work. There's not a whole lot of merit to working out when you already love to exercise. Yes, it's a good thing that you do it. There's not a, zero benefit, but
But
it's
there's no growth. There's no growth if you're only embracing those things that you are passionate about and that come easy to you.
yeah. Yeah. So we had this conversation literally this morning, and it's like, remember, there you're looking at adulthood, like complete adulthood, where you're responsible for your house. If you get married, you're responsible for providing for your family. This is a male. You're responsible for being a good dad. If the Lord gives you children, you're responsible for being a good neighbor. And none of those things come naturally to us. We are responsible in our minds for taking care of our own needs and increasing our own pleasure. Like the Bible makes it clear that we are good at taking care of ourselves first. But it tells us to
So
look
this
more
is
inward.
this falls, we've had similar conversations with the same age group where I had to remind them, remember, the way you treat your siblings when
Mhm.
you are not feeling like being around them, this will eventually be exactly what kind of dad and husband or wife and mother that you are. So it's a good idea for you to practice now being kind and being gentle, even when you don't feel like it, or even when there's nothing in it for you.
Yes. Yes, that is exactly what we were saying. Thankfully, because we've laid a lot of foundations leading up to this, instead of being like, "Well, I just don't want to," he was like, "You're right. Like, I want to be a good husband. I want to be a good
So
employee."
there again, that's that repentive when you're called out. And I've had this conversation with our children too, is the skill most almost everybody, and you see this a lot in the Christian world even, is people aren't comfortable with conviction, right? So
Mhm.
what happens when people are convicted from the Lord, but there's an actual person that carried the conviction? So, somebody's lifestyle or even somebody's words. So what happens is then people lash out at the person because now I feel bad and
Yeah.
you made me feel bad, right?
Yeah.
So we talk about this a lot right now with the younger boys because when I correct them, and now granted, I am not perfect, so sometimes I'm snappy and critical, right?
Sure.
And I
Yeah.
don't blame them if they get defensive when I'm that way.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to teach them is when you get corrected, it is your responsibility to get into a growth mindset and see what we're trying to teach you, because that is what conviction of the Lord works like. If you feel bad, like if I'm making you feel bad, then that's not me. I'm just calling you out on a boundary we had set and you cross. So if you feel bad, that's from God, not from me.
Yeah.
I am simply your parent. And so the skill of becoming comfortable with conviction and being like, okay, I can grow, I can see where I can do better, is one I so want my children to get comfortable with, because I wish I had learned it so much younger. And my default is to get defensive when
Yeah.
I am convicted.
I don't think you're alone in that at all. Ruth Ann, this has been such a productive and helpful conversation and so practical. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and being willing to be just open about the way that you guys have approached these things with your family. I am definitely going to have my son Ezra, who edits these podcasts, link to all of your resources. So tell everybody where they can find you, where they can find more information on your philosophies, your books, all the things.
So my website is RuthAnnZim.com. My book is on there. My ebook is on there. And then everything else, like we do a weekly YouTube video. So if you want to follow along with our family, that's where you'll find us. And if you type RuthAnn Zim into the YouTube search bar, our channel will come up.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, we are going to keep this conversation rolling next week with RuthAnn, and we're going to talk about older kids, because both of us have multiple older kids. We love and like our older kids. And we know that this also is a topic that really can divide people. And it's one that a lot of young moms have fear about. So be sure to check back in for that episode. If you enjoy the MS for Mama podcast, I would be so honored if you would subscribe and follow along, maybe share with friends, or even leave a review. And if you want more content on motherhood and biblical responses to cultural issues, be sure to follow along on Instagram at m.is.for.mama.